and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we are releasing a bonus episode. This is my appearance on the Fueled by Impact podcast, which is hosted by Mike Cavanaugh. Mike Cavanaugh was featured on our show, Boundless Body Radio, on episode 190. So if you haven't heard it yet, go back and check it out. He is such an inspirational dude. He is an Amazon best-selling author of Coach's Plan, among other things. He is a coach and consultant, and he does amazing work. He's a very inspirational dude. So I highly recommend checking him out on our episode, again, 190 of Boundless Body, and also his podcast, Fueled by Impact. He does a great show. He's a really great host. We've shared a few guests, including Jay Worthy, who is an amazing and inspirational dude. In this episode, we talk a lot about the pandemic. We talk about starting our business. We talk about the calories in and calories out model of fitness and health and how we feel like that is flawed. We also talk about more important things, which I believe make a bigger impact, like the labels we give ourselves or the labels that are attached to us, and getting past those, growing through discomfort, sharing your voice and sharing your gifts. And so I really hope you enjoy this episode. It was a true honor to be hosted on his show, Fueled by Impact. Make sure you go to Apple Podcasts and give him a rating and review. And without further ado, here is my episode with Mike Cavanaugh on the Fueled by Impact podcast.
What is Coach's Plan? It is a #1 Amazon bestseller. That's right, folks. This little book I truly never expected to write has officially cracked the Amazon bestseller list. So what is Coach's Plan? It is an utterly simple productivity and habit change system that actually works for people. And I know this because of the number of people who have personally reached out to me to say so. If you're even the slightest bit curious about whether something so simple can have a meaningful impact on your performance and your well-being, I highly encourage you to give yourself this very small gift. Small because you can read it in about an hour for the price of a cup of coffee, or if you're into audio, you can listen to the 90-minute audiobook on 1.5x, and 1 hour later, you know everything you need to know to join the ranks of people implementing this simple system in their life. Coach's Plan, the personal productivity system that changed my life. See for yourself what the buzz is about. Available on Amazon and through MikeCav.com. Welcome to Fueled by Impact. I'm really excited about today's episode. I have a special guest. His name is Casey Ruff. Casey has been a certified personal trainer since 2007. He successfully ran a metabolic testing program for a large gym. He oversaw 13 programs in the West region, and he's got multiple certifications as a personal trainer, lifestyle coach, and performance enhancement specialist. With his nutrition coaching certifications, he specializes in low-carb lifestyles, including keto and carnivore diets. He's helped thousands of clients over 14 years learn how to achieve their best lifestyle through movement, lifestyle management, and proper diet. He's also the host of 2 podcasts, including Boundless Body Radio, which has generated almost 200 episodes and 60,000 plus downloads in just under a year, which is super impressive. His new podcast is called the How to Make a Podcast podcast, which teaches people how to start their own podcast. I wish this thing had been out when I started my podcasting adventure. It would have been a lot more efficient than going to YouTube University and wading through a whole lot of stuff. This is perhaps one of my farthest reaching conversations. We talk about many of my passions, and so without further ado, I am so excited to bring you my conversation with Casey Ruff. All right, well, Casey, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be hosted on your show. You have awesome guests.
Well, we got awesome +1 as of today. So let's, I want to dive right in because I got so many different things to ask you. But maybe before I get into anything, I had this question that was just like gnawing me in the back of my mind. I was thinking, if I went out to Utah and I got to hang with Casey and the fam, of all your 3 children, which one do you love the most?
That's a great question. The 3 kiddos, Rex, Tucker, and Lily the cat. It's funny. Dogs are amazing to come home to when you've been gone for like 8 hours and you walk in the door and it's 5 p.m. and they're so happy to see you. And it's funny, like since the pandemic, we're spending so much time at home and training people here. It's funny, it's a little sad. They do become a little bit more obnoxious. And so we've had to try to be a little bit more patient with them. I wouldn't be surprised if they made a podcast appearance. They normally freak out about something if somebody is delivering a package or whatever, but hard to pick a favorite. But they all add a different element to our lives. It's funny how much personality each one of them has.
Well, I have a least favorite, and I've never met them, and it's your cat, because I'm so allergic to cats.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Well, you would love Lily. She lives outside, and Lily is a straight up hunter. Like it's every few weeks she'll bring us like a mouse or a small gopher or something, a vole. So you would like her.
Lily's a badass.
Total.
All right. Well, so there's like I said, a lot of different topics I want to talk about, and I definitely want to dive in. This can be my first opportunity to kind of go deep on fitness and nutrition. But before that, I know that you're aware that one of my big motivations with this show, I think it's sort of like a big tragedy when people, I'll say, like, I don't want people to die with the music still inside them. And there's probably, well, you have a lot to, I think, share on this subject, because you yourself fairly recently went through your own sort of transition. So I was wondering if you could just open by telling us a little bit about what you were doing before pre-pandemic and what you're doing now, and talk to me about that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started working for a big corporate gym back in 2007, and my interest was in heart rate training and metabolism. And so basically I got hired with almost no knowledge. I had my certification, but almost no knowledge about training. But on day one, I knew more about heart rate monitors than any of the other trainers. And so they kind of utilized me for that. And then I got into a form of testing called metabolic testing. And this is where, maybe you've seen this in a gym or a health clinic where somebody is strapped up, they're wearing a mask. The mask is connected to a tube that's collecting their respirations, which is then going into a machine, which is telling them things like VO2 max. It's telling them things like how many calories they're burning. And it's also measuring how much fat versus how much carbohydrate people are burning at different intensities, especially, or at rest. And so I became super interested in that. I got promoted to be, in charge of that program at my club. I got another promotion, be promoted, basically running that entire program in the West region and training other trainers to test people's metabolism and show people where their heart rate zones were, how to burn fat better, things along those lines. I met my wife, Bethany. I was working at the Salt Lake Club. She was working at the Denver Club. I was there for a visit. We met, we started a long-term thing, and, she ended up moving out here and we got married. So we were both working for the same corporation. Which was a gym, which shut down during the pandemic. So we weren't exactly great at diversifying our interests. And very quickly, during the shutdown in March of 2020, we were placed on unemployment. And so that was tough. It was hard because my program that I was overseeing, I'm standing next to a treadmill of somebody breathing heavily as they're exercising, and I'm concentrating the respiration. So that program was like the first one to get shut down. And to this day, I have no idea whether it's back online or not. But we realized pretty early on that, people were talking back then about the pandemic going until April or, end of May and, whatever. We just realized pretty early on that, one, not only did we think the pandemic was going to last far, far longer than anybody wanted to admit, but we also noticed that people were changing their behaviors in a way that we didn't really think they would be so fast to change back. It's almost like, remember 9/11 when you went to the airport for the first time and you walked in and there were metal detectors everywhere and there was like a security line and you were like, what the heck is this? Like I used to be able to walk to the gate. We kind of felt the same way. Like over time, you get used to that kind of thing, and people were no longer commuting to the business complex that we worked at. They were dusting off equipment that they haven't looked at in 30 years, maybe a Thigh Master or whatever. And they liked working out from home. They didn't have to get gussied up to go to a gym. And we also learned pretty quickly that you can be very effective training at home with a minimal amount of equipment. So we just kind of started our company called Boundless Body. We started training people outside in parks. We use really portable equipment. We built our basement to be a Pilates studio and a small gym so we can train people down there. We go to people's homes. So we just kind of evolved our business to continue serving basically a lot of the same people that we were working with before, just in a modified post-pandemic kind of way.
That is awesome. That's so awesome. Well, I love that you guys kind of took the fun employment experience and made something really awesome out of it. And not everyone did that. I feel like a lot of people went through that type of transition and were maybe knocked over a little bit and didn't use it as an opportunity. Was it something that when it happened, what was the process that kind of just even bring me to the moment where you guys were having those conversations about what should we do? How did that unfold?
So yeah, it was it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, man. I mean, I had been working for that corporation for 13 years, so I always just thought of myself as a company guy, and I've got all these benefits and paid time off, and I've really earned my dues at that company. And Bethany, the same. She was really well known for her work and was running the Pilates studio there, and it's hard to pinpoint an exact moment, but it was, you're right, like exactly what you described. It was this great timeout where everybody had an opportunity at some level, maybe not a great opportunity to change completely what you were doing, but at some level you had time to really be conscious and think about what things you want in your life and what things you necessarily don't want in your life. And so I really give Bethany a lot of the credit for the one that had more courage up front of like, let's do this. We can make this happen. This is how it'll look. This is how we can train people. And I was a little bit more on the doubtful side. I needed more time to kind of come around to these things. But I mean, it's like the saying goes, like the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. Like you learn things along the way. You talk about things, you make a decision. I remember the day that she said she really liked the word boundless. And within a few hours, we had our buddy make us a logo and we loved it. Like it just came from the decision. We're going to move in this direction. We're going to see what's going to happen when we do it. And you get help along the way. You know what I mean? Like you might not see a path forward, but you don't need to. You just need to take a step in the direction and things start to unfold in a way that you would have never had the ability to see before. So hard to say whether it was one moment or not, but it was a process that we, I guess, if nothing else, we allowed to unfold on its own.
Yeah. And what do you think when you kind of compare life before to life now, what's something that you would say is kind of in the column of, oh, this is so much better, and what's maybe something that you miss about the way things were before?
I'll say the latter is not much. I think everything for us we've been very blessed through this entire situation. Everything is far, far better than I could have ever imagined before. I mean, before recording this podcast, I trained all of my people for the day. I got my walks around the neighborhood. I got to listen to your episode with Jay, which was amazing. And while he was talking, he talked about the concept of getting high to get perspective. And as I was walking to one of my clients' house, I took a little detour to walk to the highest point of my neighborhood to look out on the neighborhood and see the lake and see all the birds. And every day is just such a joy that I'm just, I don't know, really grateful for. We work a limited amount of hours and we see a limited amount of people. These people are totally our family. And we've really learned how to trade the money resource for more of a time resource and really appreciate that our lives have opened up with more time. I will say, funnily, I love sports. And the one thing that I don't really miss is I don't really miss football games, which makes me a little bit sad. I'm a huge fan of Utah football, go Utes. And I don't really miss going to games and being there all Saturday afternoon. I like to have it on in the background at home while I'm doing other things. So that's a more practical one that didn't really seem to come back yet.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, I completely share your feelings about the time aspect. And I myself felt like that was always a real big struggle for me with living more of the corporate way of life. And I always had this dream of, maybe I can find the right corporate job where they'll take me 3 days a week and, I can still be doing something similar to what I'm doing. And I even actually did at one point, have an opportunity to try that. And, which was, kudos to the company that allowed me to try it.
Wow.
But in the end, didn't work. And it didn't work from their standpoint because it's so hard for that model for them to kind of fit in or work with somebody who, when everybody else is kind of salaried and being grinded and that sort of thing. And so it's interesting, but I tend to wonder, I've often thought, boy, if I just rounded up and built a company with all of the talented people out there who just want to work a few days a week, whether it's, stay-at-home moms or retired people or newly retired people or people who kind of want to phase down their careers or people like me. And I could build like a powerhouse of a company. There's got to be so many people like that. And yet there's no company that seems to be, not no company, but very few companies seem to be able to kind of work within that model. And I keep wondering if that's going to shift, and maybe the post-pandemic thing will start to open up more alternative models the way it has with more like remote working.
Wow. Dude, that's amazing. What a great idea. I mean, I remember a Joe Rogan podcast I listened to several years ago, and I can't remember who the guest was, but they made this point of like, at the time, 2018, like there's so many tools and resources for people. Like you can start a business, you can learn skills, you can watch an afternoon worth of YouTube videos and learn accounting or, investing. There's so much opportunity out there that you can learn these things. There's not a lot of rules on these things the way we think. And so I think that's a great idea. I think you're right. I think hopefully we shift towards that direction anyway.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. So, all right. So I got a question. So I'm definitely familiar with the metabolic testing. And actually, from your standpoint, are you big into endurance sports, or was that just an interest that kind of blossomed as a result of that opportunity with that company?
So I cycling has always been a passion of mine. I love mountain biking and road biking. And so that kind of fit in with that pretty well. I wouldn't say it was endurance in any type of enduring word. I mean, most of my road bike racing was done on shorter courses. Most of the races were done under an hour. So it definitely had an endurance and definitely a background in endurance sport, but nothing, I'm not out, doing several hours every single week of a particular sport.
Sure. Gotcha. And so, all right. So, like I'm all about hardball questions here, just hardball for you. Calories in, calories out. True, false, or somewhere in between?
Yes. Okay. To have more money, you need to make more money and spend less money. Like that's true, but that doesn't help anybody. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I kind of think of it that way. I've gone back and forth on, when we started with metabolism, we would measure somebody's metabolic rate, how many calories they burn. We would do some calculations to say, okay, you sit in a desk, that'll burn this many calories. You have a 45-minute workout, you burn this many calories. That's 2,500 calories in a day. So just go work out, 250 calories more and eat 250 calories less. And within 1 week, it shows a little slider that shows you'll lose 1 pound. And then you just continue doing that until there's no more pounds to lose and you go back to normal. And every time I present that to somebody now, like most people just laugh. Like we kind of know that doesn't really happen. And a big reason why is our body responds to what we do calorically, so that the game is always changing. So if I just decide today that I'm going to, eat a bunch of kale salads and I'm going to do really hard workouts, like that will definitely work and I will definitely lose weight. I think most of us know that, but the weight that most of us lose when we do that is not just coming from fat, but it's coming from muscle. It's coming from lean tissue. It's coming maybe from bone density. You can lose water, and that ends up slowing down your metabolic rate to meet your new caloric input. And so another way I put it is it's like running on a treadmill that's always speeding up. It's getting faster and faster and faster. So for that to continue to work, you have to do more work, more workouts, eat less. Well, that's not really sustainable. And the problem on the back end of that is what causes weight gain. And so by crashing your metabolism down very low, when you go back to eating the things that you were eating before, which you inevitably will, you are now in a caloric imbalance the opposite direction. So now you gain all the weight back that you lost, plus usually another 10 or 15, all to do it all over again. So I don't think that calories in, calories out is wrong. I just think we look at it in an incorrect way. And the thing I would like most people to think of is not about losing weight, but losing fat. And how can we make that person burn more fat through their day? What if I can get their resting metabolic rate to be higher, not lower. So they're just burning through more calories all the time. Same with exercise. If we get you on the right exercise program, we'll teach you how to burn fat, not just weight and, burn through muscle tissue and things like that, but we'll get you to lose fat in a way that is very sustainable. And in that same way, calories in, calories out is still working. You're just flipping the equation and looking at it a little bit differently.
Yeah. What are some of the big levers that you tend to pull with clients on both of those things that you just mentioned?
I love that you phrased it that way. I look at it the same way, which levers to pull. And for some people, it's different than others. I think the biggest lever to pull is nutrition, in my opinion. That is the one that if you can really nail with somebody, I think that gives you access to all of the other levers in a better way. I think if I can get somebody eating well, feeling really good, they've got increased mental clarity, they've got a boost of energy, then it's easier to want to work out. Then it's easier to want to get to bed a little bit earlier. You just create so many other positive impacts. And I think nutrition is the best way to look at it. So I am a nutrition coach. And, for the majority of my career, I was trained the way that, most of us are. You've been in the industry, you know what it's like. And, we're told to tell people to, get their whole grains and get their vegetables and, make sure they're eating lots of fruits, make sure you're eating every few hours to keep your metabolism up, do your grocery shopping and meal planning and, get all this stuff ready for the week. And for all the years I did that, it just didn't work that well. I mean, I couldn't really maintain it, much less my clients. And they would, buy a bunch of food and meal plans and end up throwing it away at the end of the week. They were hungry all the time. Maybe you can maintain weight that way, but I had a really tough time having people like burn fat sustainably for a long time eating in that way. And so that's what kind of pushed me towards, more of a paleo style, then more of a keto style. And now, all parts of a low carbohydrate type diet is what I recommend the most, including like a carnivore diet, which is something I'm doing now. So that to me is the biggest lever to pull. If you can get, carbohydrates as low as possible and as infrequent as possible as somebody will tolerate, I think that's the best way to create more general health in all other departments.
What if you had to peg sort of a general rule of thumb or number in terms of like grams of carbs, from your standpoint, where do you peg low carb at?
Great question. Generally speaking, I tend to consider low carbohydrate anything under about 150 grams of carbohydrates in a day. So that can include a lot of things. And, if you're more strict with your goals, you want to get there a little faster, you probably want to be on the lower end of that. If you're really active and you're already at your target weight, you can be a little bit more liberal with that. I even think like professional athletes, I wouldn't really think there's much of a need for more than like 200 grams of carbohydrates a day. And I have to say, like, carbohydrates are not a problem. They're not a big deal. They're not evil. They're not bad for you. They're certainly not necessary in the diet. So you could decide today that you would never have a carbohydrate ever and you wouldn't die. That is not true with fat or protein, the other two macronutrients, two of the three. The problem, in my opinion, is just one of availability, right? Like, if I'm walking around my neighborhood, during the summer, at the time of this recording, it's kind of early fall, like there are various places where food is growing. So a few weeks ago, there was a peach tree that was growing that would drop peaches down. Absolutely the best peaches I've ever had in my life. They were so good. A few weeks later, there was a pear tree and that was, ripe. And I walk by those trees now and there's no fruit. Like they're not bearing fruit at all right now. There's not like grains spontaneously growing all over the place. There's a few gardens and maybe they've got a little bit of food, but I mean, we just had a cold front roll through and this is going to be the start to the end of the season. And there's not going to be spontaneous carbohydrates available all over the place. And most people don't consider that they can walk into a store and buy an apple 365 days out of the year. They don't even give that a second thought. Well, it's like, where the hell did that apple come from? And when did it come from? Like that wasn't picked here now. That was picked somewhere else, sometime else for who knows how long. And so when I walk through like a grocery store or a gas station or something, I'm looking around, I'm seeing all these big, bright packages of food screaming at you with all these advertisements, and they're full of carbohydrates, and you can eat them super inexpensively all day, every single day for the rest of your life. And that's where I think the biggest problem is. It's not the carbohydrates are bad. It's just they're way more available than we've ever had them. And I don't think they're the right fuel source to be running on all year for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it is really a matter of like abundance, and so much they're just like a part of convenience foods. Can I then shift you over to the fitness side? Talk to me a little bit about your fitness philosophy.
Yeah, sure. Definitely also something that's evolved over time. Again, when we go back to the calories in, calories out model way of thinking, the way that it is, my goal there would be to throw you on a treadmill and make you run at whatever speed you can maintain until you've burned a maximal amount of calories that you can burn, and, leave wherever is a hot, sweaty mess. And it's really evolved over time. I mean, I remember being on the fitness floor at the gym and looking over at one side with all the cardio machines and seeing that most people, coming in consistently from that side of the gym, they don't really ever change all that much. Where the other side, where the weights were, people's bodies were really evolving and changing quite a bit. And so I definitely lean a lot more towards strength training than I used to. I do recommend movement and activity. So, walking is probably the number one thing that I recommend to somebody, but really just finding an enjoyable exercise, whatever that is, riding your bike or paddleboarding or walking, whatever you like, it's totally fine. And keep that intensity really low and just get movement, get outside and that kind of thing. As far as the resistance training, I used to do a lot of what people call like functional training. And so the argument would be like, okay, I'm a hockey player, so let me set up exercises that look like hockey in the gym, and then I will be better at hockey when I hit the ice. And this is all coming from a principle that Dr. Doug McGuff talks about in his great book, Body by Science, which really shifted my understanding about some of this stuff. Another example, you're a basketball player. So let's have you jump off a box and then maybe pivot and then throw this heavy medicine ball, against a wall, like a chest press or a chest pass. And that would be how I would train people. And the point that Doug McGuff made in his book, again, Body by Science, is that none of those activities are actually the activities. Like, I can't mimic hockey that well if I'm not on the ice with my equipment, with my hockey buds, talking smack with all my equipment in situations that are game situations. Like throwing a ball like a chest press is not the same as throwing a chest pass, excuse me. It's not the same as doing that in a game when you're in a double team situation. Like it's the way I think of the gym now is we use it to create strength and, build yourself up to give yourself better connective tissue, better bone density, and do that for a minimal amount of time so that you can go out and then practice your sport or your activity that you like in the context of whatever you like to do, whatever you're doing. So the way that we set up resistance training now for myself and for most people that we work with is we'll have people do an activity where they're moving a weight very, very slowly. It should be a pretty heavy weight, and we will let them move that across during a set until they really can't move the weight anymore. So we're sending a signal to the body in a really safe way that tells the body like, whoa, we need to get stronger because we tried to push this thing, whatever it was, and we weren't able to do it. We got to a point where we failed. And we'll take people through maybe a few sets of that, maybe a few different exercises. We stick with a lot of compound lifts like chest presses and rows and deadlifts. I love deadlifts, kettlebell swings, squats, things like that. But we will tend to really only do that once or twice a week, maybe, and just really focus on sending the signal so the body is working itself to build more muscle, build more strength, build more connective tissue, bone density, like we talked about, in a way that we can't really injure somebody. Like if you're moving slowly, you're not easily going to get very hurt. And we've had tremendous success approaching strength in this way. We can push people without overtraining them or, again, making them injured. And then they take that strength into their sports and see really good improvement. So that's kind of how my thinking has evolved over time on that.
Yeah, I love that. So you said earlier in our conversation when after the pandemic happened and you saw that, hey, a lot of people are probably not going to be going back to the gym, or at least not anytime soon, and they can still work out at home and have just as great success. If you had one piece of kit that you think would be like if you had to survive on one piece of kit alone or recommend for people, what would you pick?
That's a great question, man. I would say it's a tough one. I mean, my portable kit fits in a small backpack. Like you don't need many things, but I would probably say if you had a suspension trainer, TRX being one of the most popular and a brand that we utilize, I would say you can pretty much do everything with a TRX and have enough variety and different things that you can do to keep yourself interested. It's also cool because since it hangs, hangs from the top, like you can install bolts in your garage. You could throw that over a frame in your basement. Oftentimes we take it outside. Like I'm training on monkey bars many sessions a week. We train on a tree a few sessions a week. Like it's so awesome to be, accomplishing your fitness goals and taking in a sunrise during your session. It's like so cool. It's really, it's portable, really, really versatile. That's what I'd recommend.
That's a good one. And I do love more outdoor training. I'll throw more people in that direction too. It's so great.
So great.
So you started Boundless Body Radio and you've like just absolutely crushed it in terms of the amount of awesome content that you've created and that you've put out there and the amount of people who are responding to it. I'm curious, with all of these really, really, really compelling guests that you've had, what's the biggest thing or things potentially that you've implemented in your life since you started the show that have had the greatest impact on you?
Wow. Deep question, man. That's a really deep question. I would say the importance of using the mute button during the sessions and also in life. Listening to people tell their stories and trying to take things in without always stepping in and interrupting or just thinking about the next thing that I'm going to say. That's something that I really have gotten a lot of value from. I mean, as trainers, you know how it is. Like as you're training somebody, you need to listen to your clients. You need to remember things about their lives, and you're not just counting to 12 poorly. You're also, asking about their kiddos and how their work is going. And you're a very inexpensive therapist for a lot of people. So I think podcasting has really helped push me a little bit more in the direction of what can other people say and how can I help them tell their story, which is also really important to hear. So I would say listening.
What about like just in terms of this whole entrepreneurial adventure that you and your wife are embarking upon or have embarked upon? What have you learned about yourself on this journey?
Wow. Great question. Labels that you have attached to yourself that say you are a certain something are all fake. And maybe you downloaded those things. Maybe they were downloaded by your parents onto you, but they are all made of absolute fluff. They are constructs of the ego that you take on to be your, perceived reality. They don't exist. They are completely made up. And I look back and think like, I'm an entrepreneur. To even say that, like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I never have been an entrepreneur, but you know what? Yes, I am. I'm a podcaster. I do all kinds of stuff that I never used to do. I build a website. I do accounting, like all of these things that I had held myself back for so many years thinking that I wasn't. When you start to really address those and get very conscious with them and see them for what they are, which is, again, this made up set of walls and boundaries in your own brain that are not anything, that don't exist. I think that's the biggest thing I would say that I have learned to embrace and take on. And it's terrifying and also really empowering because it gives you that kind of growth mindset or that yes mentality of like, okay, well, I might not be doing these things perfectly now, but I can grow, I can learn them over time. And that's probably been the biggest thing and the biggest blessing from all of this.
Yeah, it's fairly liberating to kind of get to a point where you divorce yourself from a role. And because I think you are wearing so many hats and shifting and probably adapting along the way, there is such almost like more of a flexible way of viewing yourself and what you do that I think just is part and parcel with the journey itself.
Yeah, definitely. My favorite book is The Untethered Soul. And Michael Singer does such a great job in that book talking about these things. And he describes like a dog that has an invisible fence. There's no real fence there. It's just he gets a little zap when he gets too close to the edges. But he gives the example of a brave little dog that decides that he's going to move towards where the edges are, and he can feel the buzzing and the sensation of getting zapped. But once he makes it across the sidewalk, like he's free to go do whatever he wants. And I think that's such a wonderful example, and one I try to remind myself of often, that if you're okay with some discomfort, then you have a whole world of possibility in front of you. You just have to be uncomfortable. That's it. It's not a big deal.
It is such good training. By the way, I love Michael Singer, and I thought his Surrender Experiment book was amazing as well. So shout out to Michael Singer. The moving through discomfort or kind of living with discomfort, I feel like I now advocate so strongly for actively training in discomfort, because the amount of stuff that I have personally felt like I've shed, just like what you were describing there. And a lot of it for me has come down to, it's like a combo of sort of, just approval based, or like what people think, kind of letting go of a ton of that and just being like, all right, I'm kind of doing my dance here, and it is what it is. And that's been extremely freeing. And then also maybe more on the financial security side of things, because similar to you, I had mostly spent a lot of years where I knew I was getting a paycheck regularly, which that isn't always part of the package when you go entrepreneurship.
That's right.
So yeah, that's awesome. I completely resonates with me how you described that. I am curious on the flip side, just around the challenges. What's been most difficult about this process for you?
No question, imposter syndrome. No question. Feeling the resistance to, I would say, the moment of like pushing record on our first podcast, for example, like feeling like what could I possibly say or create that nobody has already done? There's so much content out in the world, and we're interviewing people that get interviewed all the time. And just understanding that you do have something to contribute. And it may be in your own little corner in the globe with, not millions and millions of people or numbers or downloads or money, but you have an impact, you have a voice, you have something that can be shared. And when you limit yourself and don't press record, whether it's on a podcast mixer or in life, whether you're not, sharing what your gifts are, you're doing all of us a disservice. And for me personally, the hardest part of all of this was pushing record the first time, and many, many times after that. It's difficult to get past that and realize that we do have something to share, and we can, move the message forward to somebody who will appreciate it.
And do you do anything, or is it just the process of I do it anyway, even though that imposter syndrome or the doubts are there? Do you have like a process?
Yeah. I just like Stephen Pressfield's work, like the resistance, you show up, you do it. If you're a writer and it's 9 a.m., you sit down and you write, and it doesn't matter whether it's a beautiful day outside or if it's raining or if you don't want to, or you don't think you have anything to say. You practice. If you want to be a professional at something, you need to do that thing all the time. And you need to be uncomfortable with that. And you need to understand that you're not going to get the same out of it every day. It might be, harder one day. It might be crappy work one day, but you do it and you show up. And over time, that process is what is refining you, if you allow it to, and you become better and things get easier and you get help from whoever, the universe, the muse, as he talks about. Like there are stepping stones that help you along the way, but they don't do that if you're not willing to do your work every single day. And so I have to remind myself that this is something that I take extremely seriously, and I want to be a professional. Yesterday, I played my very last game of golf that I'll ever play in my life. I am a complete amateur. I'm not a professional. I never got any good at it. I am mostly miserable when I do it. It's a long chunk of the day. And so I played my last round with my dad, who I absolutely love. And we had an amazing time and a great round and a big hug afterwards. And I thanked him for introducing me to the sport. That's amateur. Like, I don't have to do that. I don't get paid for that. But if you want to be a pro at something, you have to do it. There's no shortcuts. Do the work and enjoy the process while you're doing it. Like, I get so frustrated when I see, like, on a podcasting page that, like, you know, I use this example a lot of my new podcast, but Shauna and her neighbor who get together every Tuesday and drink rosé at 2 p.m. and they talk about their crazy cats. And after 3 episodes of Shauna and her friend and their crazy cats, like, they only have 3 downloads and they're not getting monetized. Like, give me a break. Like, do some work. Get after it a little bit and just know that this is going to be a long process if you want to be good at it.
It's. I think the rosé is the problem. If they chose a different, I love that you referenced Stephen Pressfield in his work on this and the War of Art being like just a phenomenal book for anybody who's trying to do anything creative whatsoever. And what's funny about him is just like the amount of years that he slogged it out, before he enjoyed any more like external success is like extremely humbling. And it's a great reminder that you do have to show up. And also what you said at the end around enjoying the process, it's so, it comes across as cliche, but it really often is like, would you be doing this anyway? Regardless of how many downloads people, you know, you're going to get, or regardless of whether or not you're going to ever monetize something or whatever it is, would you be doing it anyway? And if the answer is no, then you probably have some other questions you should ask yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't pursue anything potentially just for the money or the outcome, but you just have to then be very honest with yourself, because the minute the going gets tough, it's going to be very easy to pull the plug and say, you know what, like, let's just do the rosé and skip the microphones, because this isn't going anywhere. So yeah, I appreciate all of what you just said. Your podcast that you have just started. So first of all, I love it. And also great name. And
thanks for appreciating the goofy name. I thought it was pretty goofy myself. Dude, so I'm sitting around. I'm not like ideating or journaling or anything. It's like Friday night. I'm chilling out watching Netflix, just like everybody else. And it hit me like a bag of bricks. And within 30 seconds, I had it searched that this didn't really exist in the way that I thought it should. A podcast that explains people how to podcast. I had helped a few people get started on their podcasts and showing them my process and everything. Within 30 seconds, dude, I had every episode planned out, storyboarded. Like this was not my idea. This came through me in a way that it's hard to explain. I was not looking to do this at all. But again, we reached out to my logo guy. Within a few hours, I had a logo for it. I had all my episodes planned out that I wanted to do. And the How to Make a podcast was born, apparently. So
that's awesome.
It's so bizarre, dude. It's so weird. The funny thing was too, like after I had written everything out, I was ready to record episode 8, which is all about hosting your podcast. And as I was doing my final research, I did stumble upon a podcast that was done in 2019 called How to Start a Podcast. So slightly different name, dude, same format. Almost exactly the same format, really similar order. They talked about the very first thing that we ever talked about, which is something you just mentioned, which is finding your why. Like, why are you trying to do this really with anything in life? And if I would have found that when I did my search the first time, I would have never done this little side project. So I don't know why that was kept from me until the day that I was recording about them. So I gave them a bunch of shout outs and told them sorry for doing the same thing they already did quite well 2 years ago. But yeah, so what I've done, I've created an introductory episode that basically gets you listed. And then I have recorded 10 episodes. They're all going to launch on September 30th, 2021. Apparently September 30th is podcasting day. There's a day for everything. So weird, but whatever. Thought it was good timing. They're all just going to launch, and they're step 1 through whatever in 10 episodes that take people through this process, things to think about. The way I wanted to set it up is I wanted to give people a few options of ways that they can do it. But I found that the options were almost making things a lot more confusing. So in every episode, I'll maybe give people some options for things, but I want to make absolutely sure that everybody knows exactly what I do. And if that serves to be a goalpost to get started for somebody, when they know exactly what steps they can take to start their own podcast, what to expect, how much money to spend, that kind of thing, then I think it's a cool idea. So that's all going to launch all at the same time, all 10-ish episodes. And then I kind of wanted to keep it going in some kind of format. I haven't totally decided, but the thing I probably will do is bring other podcasters on and do like an interview, maybe every other week or once a month or something like that, where we're talking specifically about what their process is, what their why is, things they've learned along the way, the biggest things they've goofed up, stuff like that. And just, we'll maybe release it, again, like 2 or 4 a month, something along those lines. But yeah, that's how to make a podcast.
Yes, I love it. Well, I'm glad that you didn't discover what was already out there in a way. This is something that I've just learned myself too, with respect to the internet in general, which is in some respects, it's like, oh man, it's just always going to feel like there's nothing new under the sun. Everything's been done. There's no such thing as an original thought, et cetera, et cetera. And while there might be actually some truth to that, I mean, we just maybe weren't exposed to it because we weren't all hyper connected. There's also the fact that you didn't discover that. Apparently it was out when I was looking for help. I didn't discover it either. And your spin, even if it's similar, is always going to be a little bit different than somebody else's. Your reach is going to be a little bit different. And also you said something that I loved, which is like, this came through me. And I feel that way about a lot of things that are either they're your creative expression in some way, whether or not that's, more of like an artistic type of thing. It can just be anything that shows up that you feel called to pursue in some respects that almost feels like it's coming from beyond you. Mm-hmm. And that to me means like it needed to come through you, whether it's for your own growth and process or, the way that it happens to reach certain people who need to hear it at the time that they hear it. So I'm super glad that things unfolded the way they did. And I look forward to all these episodes dropping.
Yeah, all in one batch. And it was funny too, because, we've done a lot of different podcasts with Boundless Body Radio, but I've never done a solo show. And so it helps me appreciate shows like yours that have both. Like those are two different things. Like talking by yourself for 20 minutes, it occurred to me on like episode 3, like, wait, I can take a break anytime I want and like grab a drink. Why am I trying to power through this like I would like an interview? It's a totally different thing. And so I do really appreciate podcast hosts who can dance between like an interview style and then maybe do a discussion style and then solo. Those are way different, as I learned.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit like your functional training comment where you think it would translate totally, and turns out there's always like different skills that show up. Well, so where should we send people to find you and any of the work that we've already mentioned throughout this conversation?
Yeah, of course. So probably the best place would be myboundlessbody.com. Just one word. And that has the landing page for everything that we offer. So it explains, Bethany introduces, her and me. The podcast is there. You can click on any of the episodes. It'll send you to all the different, registries so you can listen there. We have a blog that I do very, very occasionally. I found that when I started podcasting, I started not writing as much. I didn't like it as much as I used to. We also offer things like, $15 Zoom Matt Pilates classes that anybody around the world can join. We keep those very inexpensive. Anybody can join up with those. You can always book a free 30-minute conversation with either one of us to talk about anything really. So yeah, that's the best place to send people. Again, that's myboundlessbody.com.
Okay. And there are links to that everybody can find. So I have one, maybe two, we'll see here, questions that I want to get to before I let you off the hook. So one is your show. What do you hope the impact of the show is for people?
Great question. The reason we did Boundless Body Radio, going back to what we talked about before, the why was very clear from the very beginning that this is a passion project. I am fronting all the costs and time and everything to put this out into the world. I have zero expectation that it's going to reach anybody, really, besides me. And even if that were the case, that would be enough. And if it was something that, I had a client who wanted some information about good minimalist shoes and the structure of the foot. Well, guess what? We've created this episode. Here, have this. This is a present of a conversation that I had with an expert about it. Or, it's the ability to help people in a way on a medium that has helped me so much in my growth. And just putting that out there alone it's its own gift. That's all I expect.
And now for my true final question. So, if you could leave people with one thing that they might either consider trying that is in your repertoire or something that you just generally feel inspired to share right this moment that would give them a boost in their life, what would it be?
Take the time to sit down and think and feel and get really, really clear with what your definition of success is, and know that it might not match up with everybody else's definition of success. And that's okay. And if you do that one thing, which feels big and scary, and most people put it off or think they don't have the time to do it, I think that's the most meaningful thing that anybody can do in their lives. And then follow that path. Take a step. You're not going to get there overnight, but take a step in the right direction and be ready for help along the way. That's the one thing I would say.
Well, Casey, I have enjoyed this conversation so much. I hope it is not our last. I thank you so much for taking the time and having this conversation with me.
Thank you, Mike. It's been an absolute honor. It was an honor to host you. You're a great podcast host, and I really love our conversations.
All right, folks, as always, thank you for listening. And don't forget to check out the Amazon best-selling book, hitting #1 in 3 different categories, Coach's Plan, the personal productivity system that changed my life. Go to mikecav.com and you will find it, and you will read it or listen to it, and subsequently you will crush it. And that's all for now. Till next time.
So thank you again so much for listening to this episode of my appearance with Mike Cavanaugh on the Fueled by Impact podcast. Again, be sure to check out our episode that we did with him on Boundless Body. That was episode 190. Super inspirational dude. And make sure that you please go over to Apple Podcasts and give Mike a rating and review for his podcast, Fueled by Impact. It really makes a difference, and we really appreciate you going there and doing that. And thank you again so much for joining us on this episode of Boundless Body Radio.